Hi, you're listening to When Isabel Met Aviva, a podcast about rom-coms, female-driven screenwriting, and how to break into the entertainment industry. I'm Aviva.
And I'm Isabel.
And thanks for checking out this episode, everyone.
I always forget what number it is. I think this is 6.
I know. I think you might be right. It's all a blur. And today we are interviewing Eirene Donohue, who wrote A Tourist's Guide to Love, which is on Netflix and came out last year. And she also does holiday rom-coms. And I should not have texts coming in right now. You heard that?
Oh, I didn't.
Just clicked. Okay, good. It's distracting. We can just keep it in for authenticity's sake. But I gotta click the do not disturb button on my MacBook.
Wait, did her movie come out last year? Really? I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yes, it came out in 2023, and we both watched it. So I think we want to just chat to her mostly about that and her career, and I love a good wanderlust rom-com. So
yeah, I know. I was gonna say.
I think this one did a really good job. Yeah, really good job showing the country and cultural differences and culture shocks, which I love. And yeah.
Well, before we dive into the interview, I want to show you something that I bought. I bought this in Los Angeles, but I wanted to share like a little excitement thing. I don't know if I just like haven't been to like a local bookstore in a long time. I thought it was really cute that in this bookstore that I was in, I think it was called Skylight Books in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
there was like a whole section that was just called screenplays, and it was just like all screenplays like in book form.
That's so cute.
I know. Is this a thing? Is this like I'm totally out? Because like they look like plays, kind of like I've seen like playbooks before, obviously, but I hadn't seen like like I know A24 does those like really nice books, right, where they like print the whole screenplay, and I've seen that kind of stuff before, but I'd never seen like an actual screenplay book section in a bookstore. But I found my favorite script and rom-com in a book format.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to read it because just like it's interesting because just looking at it, like it looks more like a play, like the formatting in this.
Yeah, different format. Is that going to annoy you? Do you think?
I don't know. I was like browsing the play section because I was kind of like thinking about how, when I first learned about screenwriting, I learned how to write plays, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to read some plays. Like it's been a while since I've read a play. And then I saw this and entered the screenplay section. Yeah. But just going through it briefly, there's like different conversations that like aren't in the movie. So I'm kind of like, oh, is it like, I don't know. But we do have coming up soon an episode that's going to just be all about Nora Ephron. So I'm thinking
this is
right. I'm going to try and read this before then. And then I think like that would be, it'll add to our discussion for.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. No, I don't think every bookstore has that. Well, at least the previous bookstores I've been, I've never seen that, but I was just in one a few days ago. But they should.
I thought it was so exciting. I was like, oh, this is good to know that like other people want. I mean, I guess maybe it's because it's Los Angeles and it was like a arts and culture section of the bookstore, but I'm
that's really excited. Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. All right. So should we get Eirene in here now?
Yeah. Let's start chatting with her.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast today. We're really excited to have you. Aviva and I both watched your movie on Netflix, which also congrats, by the way. You have a movie on Netflix, which is really cool.
Very exciting. Yeah, it was actually released almost a year ago. It was a year ago last week on the 21st. I think April 21st was when it released. So it was like, popped up in like my memory, and it's like, oh my God, it's been a year. Like it's been a crazy trip, and it's been really exciting, the reception of it and everything. So that has been wonderful this past year.
That's so awesome. I guess Before we talk about your movie, I would love to just know a little bit about your background. Like, how long have you been a screenwriter? How did you get into screenwriting? Kind of curious just to hear a little bit about your journey to, starting.
Yeah,
And
well,
then
it's been quite a long, winding road, and so I grew up in Rhode Island. My mother is Vietnamese. My father is uh, Irish Catholic, Boston naval officer. And so they met in Vietnam during the war and then had 6 kids in 7 years. And I'm the youngest of those kids. So it was a big, crazy, rambunctious family. Grew up in a small New England suburban all white town, being one of the very few people of color there. And I was I was a nerd, I was a jock, I was pretty much all the things. I played soccer, I loved movies. My dad was really into movies, but I grew up because he was so strict. I spent a lot of time watching like old Hollywood movies, sort of like black and whites, Fred Astaire, the Thin Man series, Casablanca. I was obsessed with old Hollywood, and grew up, yeah, watching those types of movies and just always being inspired by them. And when I was real little, there was a part of me that wanted to be an actor, but then when I was in high school, I actually worked at a video store, like a local tiny little video store straight out of the 90s. Like I thought I was going to be Quentin Tarantino. It was right when Pulp Fiction was happening and the whole independent movie scene. And I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And I would just watch all those movies. And then I went to Brown and took their film department there is called Modern Culture and Media, and I took like the intro class, and I hated it. It was all theoretical. It was all very to me it seemed very pretentious, and it was all about theory, and I like you didn't get into the production stuff and all that stuff till like later, and I just wanted to talk about stories and movies and characters. And so then I actually ended up becoming kind of randomly a Latin American history major, but that was just because I love history and I love stories, because history is just basically stories to me in a better way of understanding our world. And so then I found a professor, and he happened to teach Latin American history, and I loved all of his classes, so I just took all of his classes. And then on the side, I was taking a lot of creative writing classes, and mostly doing memoir, actually, and writing about my my family and my experiences. And so I sort of got set along that path a little bit. And then after graduation, I went to Vietnam for the first time. Right after graduation, my oldest sister, who had been born in Vietnam, decided that she wanted to do a wedding ceremony over there. So we went back, and it was my dad's first time back since the war, and it was most of my siblings' first time, and it was amazing and wonderful and beautiful and just transformative, and really sort of opened my eyes to a part of myself, part of my identity, and meeting my mom's whole family is over there. I don't speak Vietnamese, but it was just like, oh my God, suddenly you have this giant family. And so I went back that winter with my oldest sister, and we were backpacking and traveling, and she had gotten a grant. She's a modern dance choreographer and had gotten a grant to study the Vietnamese contemporary performing arts community. So we were over there. And right before I went over there, my safe, stable, if you watch Tourist Guide to Love, you will see the inspiration for this. My safe, stable college boyfriend, nice guy, broke up with me right before I went to Vietnam. And I was devastated, but then quickly realized that like, I wanted a different path from him anyway. And so it was actually a good thing. And then my last week there, walked into a bar with my sister, and there was nowhere to sit. And there were these 4 backpackers, and one was a dreamy Canadian surfer. And he was supposed to be my holiday fling. And that was 24 years ago. And so that was sort of the inspiration. He was very much like a free spirit adventurer. So he was the inspiration he's white, but we flipped the races sort of in Tourist Guide to Love. But the sort of energy of that story is based on my own life, and like leaving a safe space and then deciding that I wanted to sort of live off the beaten path, and finding a partner who also wanted to do that. So anyway, we just started traveling, and so I spent 2 years teaching English in Japan off the coast of Nagasaki with the JET program. Then a bunch of months backpacking through Indonesia. Then we went to South Africa and got our offshore yachtmaster sailing certification because we wanted to sail around the world. And it was me and like 8 dudes on a boat for 4 months, which was intense. And South Africa was beautiful and it was amazing. And then we went back to Rhode Island, and we were supposed to get jobs on boats, but then my dad was sick and 3 of my sisters were pregnant, and I'd been gone a really long time. So I was like, oh God, I need to stay. So my husband, boyfriend at the time, went and worked on a yacht for a year. And I was like, oh, wait, if I'm going to tell people I'm going to be a writer, I should probably write something, because I hadn't really been writing anything for many, many years. And I was like, okay, so I wrote a novel, which never got published, which is a autobiographical or semi-autobiographical book about a girl and her experiences with different boys throughout her life. It's called The History of Boys, and each chapter is like, you know, a different boy.
I love
and
that.
I've actually rewritten it recently. So, because when I wrote it, I wrote the main character as like white because I wanted to sell it, and that's how it was when I wrote it. Like, they weren't really interested in stories beyond the sort of the white demographic, and so I actually recently rewrote it to make it more true. And so the main character is half Vietnamese, and so now I'm like, okay, maybe I'm gonna start like trying to get that published or something. But so side note, people, when you write these things, if it doesn't happen, you can always come back. You never know. These old projects you've written and they're in your drawer, like they can always come back. You never know. But then, so after that, I decided that I was not happy being completely separated from my boyfriend for the entire year. And so I proposed, and we got married, and he moved to Rhode Island with me, and we lived with my parents for 5 months, and we got his green card, and we ended up living there for 3 years. And I was bartending, nannying, tutoring, freelance writing, like all of those things that you do when you're, you know, trying to be a writer, like all of those odd jobs that you work so that you can be a writer. And then my husband was working at he was a marine electrician, but he also he would deliver yachts, like, because rich people don't move their own yachts. They hire people to move their yachts between different places. And so he was gone for 6 weeks doing delivery. And I was like, why have I never written a screenplay? Like, it was always my first love, always. But it just felt weird. Like, what am I going to move to LA and like get an agent? Like, who does that? Like, how do you do that? I don't know how you do. Like, I have them and I don't know how I did it. Like, it just felt so foreign. I was like, I'm going to live like in New York. I'm going to write novels, you know, like it just, but I was like, whatever. I'm very much the type of person that like, I'm like thinking about, oh, I should do this. I should do this. I'm just like, I'm just going to do it. So I got some books on how to write screenplays, and I read a couple screenplays, and I wrote a screenplay, and I hired a woman to be my script consultant because I didn't know what I was doing, and she tore it apart, and then I rebuilt it, and then I entered it into the Nickel Fellowship. And right at that time, which is the if anyone doesn't know, it's run by the Academy Awards. It's sort of like the biggest, most prestigious amateur screenwriting competition out there.
I think it just closed like a couple of days ago, right?
It closed the entries. Great program, highly recommend it. And then right after that, we decided we weren't living the life we wanted to live. And so we sold everything, and we got into our 1973 Vita van and spent the next year and a half driving around the US and Canada. And along the way, I made it to the semifinals of the Nickel Fellowship. And so for me, that was just like this huge validation of like, oh, wait, like I can do this. I should keep doing it. And then eventually, through a friend, was introduced to my manager, and he said, you know, if you want to do this, you got to move to LA. And I was like, park down the street, done. We are here. And so that was 13 years ago. And it was great. Like, I got my agent, my manager helped me get my agent. And then I started going out on general meetings and making connections. I wrote another script. We took that script out, didn't sell that, but then within a year, I had sold my first project to Lionsgate, which was a feature pitch for a female college comedy, and that got me into the Writers Guild. And I've been working pretty much as a writer ever since. So throughout the years, I wrote a TV pilot, sold that to ABC Studios, and have sold another pilot as well. Never been staffed on a TV show. I'm a weirdo. Like, I can apparently sell pilots, but can't get staff. And then have, you know, gone back and forth between TV and features and TV movies. And a couple years ago, I hadn't sold anything in a while, and saw an article about how they were making 100 Christmas movies a year. And so I was like, I love Christmas movies. I want to do this. So I, we connected with a woman that I knew at Lifetime that I had worked with, and pitched some Christmas movies. And so that sort of started the Christmas movie chapter of my career, which has just been this wonderful, wonderful thing. And then along the way, selling some other stuff, pitching on other stuff, and then Tourist Guide to Love came out, and so that has just been like sort of just the super exciting and just spreading, because I love my Christmas movies, but Netflix has access to such a bigger audience, and the experience of writing something which was the first American movie fully filmed in Vietnam, was just being able to show Vietnam as a love story and not a war story, because that's the only image that Americans have, has been just incredibly gratifying for me over the past year, and the reception that people have. So yeah, so now I live in LA. I live in Hollywood. I have a kid. I have a 10-year-old, and my husband is now a nurse. And yeah, I don't know. That's how I got here.
What a wild ride.
I know. It's great though. I feel like I relate to so much of your story, and it's also always so refreshing to hear like when other writers have similar journeys of just like working all these different jobs while also like balancing finding time to write. And then like I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Like that is kind of the journey for most writers.
Definitely. And I mean, I do a lot of mentoring, and when I talk to younger writers, like, there's a college student that I'm mentoring right now who's about to graduate, and I just, or these, anyone who's like on the verge of graduation or starting their career out, and it's like, oh, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, well, I got to get like this I'm going to get a PA job. I'm going to, I'm applying for all these internships and everything. I'm like, okay, that's great. I love that you have that. But like, here's an alternate path. Go live an interesting life for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or, I mean, I say this to any writer, go live an interesting life. Like, if you want to be a good writer, you have to have an interesting life. You have to go out and experience the world, meet people. Cause then your characters are coming from an organic place of actual people, and they don't seem cliched and they don't seem generic, or your life experiences. If you are graduating from college and then you just go straight into the grind and the work of Hollywood, then your frame of reference is so limited, and you're actually just being reductive of movies you've seen and of stories you've heard and not stories you've lived. And so then when it comes to that point where you have to tell a story, it's not necessarily going to be as interesting. And so for me, I feel like there are times when I'm like, oh God, I should have started earlier. Like I didn't really start until I was in my 30s. And so I feel like I'm behind in some ways. But then I think that the reason I had such success so quickly was because I did have a fresh voice. I did have interesting things to say. I had something that set me apart. And because I had these crazy life experiences, I can now, write stories about all the different parts of my life and my history and the different people that I've met. And it just brings, even in just like a comedy, or it just brings more depth to it because of the different situations that I've been in that sound crazy, but actually happened, or that happened to someone I know. So for me, that is just one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give to people is, and not just live an interesting life, live, if you know you want to be a writer, but you are stuck working jobs where you are not writing, be intentional about it and think of it as research. So think that every experience, you can pull something from this. So yeah, you are living at home. You have to live at home with your parents in like their basement or something. It's like, well, maybe you can write a show about this someday. So sort of pay attention to the details and sort in the emotional landscape of that, and think, how does this benefit not just my writing, but my life? Like, what can I learn from this experience? You have to work at a fast food restaurant. Maybe there's going to be a show or a movie set in a fast food restaurant someday, so it's not just, and all your crazy coworkers. I mean, those are characters. Think of the people that you work with or you're in like temping on Wall Street, which I did all through college, like now I have a very clear world and like view into the corporate American landscape because I worked there for years on and off, or campgrounds, or living in my van, or like all of those things, all of those different worlds that you think like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm stuck here. It's like, no, use that time, and then you can benefit from it and just use it with your writing. So that's
As you were sharing your background, I was thinking, oh, that'd be an interesting rom-com about like the yachting world and van life, I think, is untapped. That is such an interesting topic. And
I did want to shout out the movie. The movie Adrift is about what you're talking about, right? The like how rich people don't move their yachts from place to place, because that movie, great movie. It's like kind of intense.
Is that with Shailene Woodley?
Yeah, Shailene Woodley's in it, but it starts with the premise of like this rich British family is like looking for someone to take their yacht back to California or something.
Because they don't. That's the boring part. That's the boring, scary part when they're like in the open ocean for days and days. So they hire people to move their boat from like St. Bart's to, you know, the, I don't know, wherever it is that they go.
Like they just want it to be like off the coast while they're like chilling on it.
Like, they just want to like day trip around the island and then come into the restaurants and the yacht club and spend the day.
The secrets of the yacht world.
Good life. I'll get there someday.
But I love the idea. Everything is material, and hardship and difficulty. Like I also I try to think about that as well. Like it's all part of being a writer, and maybe it will seep in some way into our writing.
It's so important because it's like I said, it is such a varied path, and it is such a hard business, and the chances are so low often that you do spend a lot of time doing things besides writing. Or you do in order to like pay the bills, and it's hard to find, you know, the balance of finding a job that supports you financially and that doesn't suck your will to live and all of your creativity and all your time so that you never actually get to write. And I don't know what I'm always like, you need to find some sort of passive income or side hustle. And I'm like, but I don't know what those things are. I wish I knew. Like, I wish I had done that in my 20s. I was like, you should buy some real estate. Like, as if I could have bought real estate in my 20s. Like, but I could not have. I mean, maybe I could have. If I had known, like, maybe I would have actually, like, taken that corporate job for a year and saved up a down payment so I could buy, like, an investment apartment that I could then rent out that would sustain me as a writer. But, like, who's thinking about that? I mean, like, when I was in my 20s, I was like, woo! Like, I had a couple grand, like, that will allow me to live in Indonesia and backpack around for like 3 months. Like I'm going to do that instead. But that is the whole thing. Like you get older and you're like, oh, why didn't anyone really tell me that financial security was like important? I should have been like funding my retirement when I was in my 20s instead of like scrambling in my 40s or saving money or investing in things. Like I had just invested money when I was in my 20s, then you could be living off of it in my dry spells, you know, but like, you don't think about that. Yeah. So that is something to think about because it's amazing how much more creative you can be when you are financially secure, when you're not scrambling paycheck to paycheck and so stressed out, because it's really only been in the past couple of years that I've reached a place where I feel financially secure. Like I've spent most of we grew up without a lot of money. Parents always gave us what we needed, but like you just always knew, like I was working since I was 10, you know, like raking leaves, shoveling snow, like all of those things. I've been broke for most of my adult life as well. And so there is still that like fear because I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, you go through these long stretches. So the idea, like there is not a lot of security. You could sell a show and then a couple years later have to like sell your house or something because you haven't been hired for years. So that is a part of the job as well. So trying to create systems within your life because, you know, having health insurance, you know, being able to pay your rent, things like that. Now, so for like when you're talking about these Christmas movies, I always talk about this, and this is another piece of advice to give people. I'm like, just write a Christmas movie. I shouldn't because I'm like, now I have competition. But like, I mean, now they make like 200 Christmas movies a year. Everyone loves Christmas movies, and I love watching them. And so for me, it's great because and they make new ones every year. So I make at least one Christmas movie a year usually. And I mean, it's great for me. I have a wonderful relationship with Lifetime. And so I usually just sort of work directly with them. But I'm also starting to work with Hallmark as well. And they don't just make Christmas movies. They make, you know, 100 movies a year. and their audience is very loyal, and I'm a part of that audience. And romantic comedies for me, I think, are so underrated in terms of the power that they have to affect people's lives. And it's people get so condescending about it, like, oh, stupid, like dumb, like, oh, it's a guilty pleasure. It's a sense like, no, it's a pleasure. And why does there have to be guilt attached to that? Like,
yeah,
I have a whole TED talk about how like the condescension around rom-coms is just like because of the patriarchy and because we devalue anything that is considered feminine. But
that's kind of how our podcast got started.
Right.
Just like we want to uplift the rom-com.
Yeah, I mean that for me, like let's talk about Hallmark movies, right? So my mom, my father had Parkinson's and dementia, and before he passed away, she spent every day for years and years and years taking care of him, and it was a very, very hard life. And at the end of the night, when he would go to bed, all she wanted to do was just like relax and be comforted, and she would watch Hallmark movies. And because they are soothing and they are soft and they are gentle, and all the things that people criticize them for are the things that she wanted and the things that she needed. If she fell asleep in their formulaic, if she fell asleep in the middle of it and woke up 15 minutes later, it's okay. She like doesn't have to be like, oh, well, or if she falls asleep and a whole different movie is on, or if she never finishes this movie, like, it's okay. Or if she starts it halfway through, it's okay. But it's giving her something. It was giving her, and the same to a lesser degree for me when I watch them. I'm usually in that same moment of wanting a little bit of comfort. And the fact that people don't value that demographic, they don't value that audience experience, makes me so angry. Like, why is a deep, dark drama so much more valuable? They have their value, but like, or like an action movie for men, like, oh, like those aren't formulaic.
Right.
Like those aren't generic and formulaic and
shallow, those Marvel
but
movies.
Like somehow, no one has to be ashamed to watch and be like, oh yeah, I like Marvel movies. Like, sorry, like. But if we're like, ooh, I like Hallmark movies, then suddenly we're just being like a dumb, basic woman. And I just get very angry about that because I understand the value of it to the audience, and I like to respect my audience for whatever it is and whatever they need. And as a writer, you can write to that audience. Like I can write a movie that is softer and gentler and has less conflict. And if you are judging it in the basis of what it's trying to deliver, then that's what you should be judging it on. And I don't apologize for serving the needs of the audience that I'm writing to for their needs, because those are important as well. And providing comfort, providing entertainment, providing a little bit of joy in the life of someone who might, outside of that movie, not have that in their life is so powerful. And I'm so grateful that I actually get to do that, or like the Christmas movies and uplifting them. And same thing, like, when Taurus, when I sold it, I was just like so excited, like, oh my God, I'm getting Netflix, rom-com with Rachel Lee Cook, and it was set in Vietnam. Like, I was really excited by that. And then after, and I did, like, part of the reason I wanted to tell this story was so that I could present Vietnam as a love story instead of a war story, because Americans only think about Vietnam in reference to the war. They only talk about it in reference to the war. And for me, I have that aspect in my life, clearly, from like my parents and their experience and my own knowledge and the experience of so many Vietnamese people from the war and after the war. But it's not just that. That's only a part of Vietnam's identity. And the other part, the joy, the love, the beauty, was not being showcased because you can't film in Vietnam if you're making a movie about the war, because the government will not let you. Oh, wow. Because if we're, they're the bad guy. Like, the Vietnamese government is not going to come in and let the Americans make a movie in which, the Communist Party is the villain. And so that's why we had such access, was because ours had nothing to do with the war. It was just about love. It was about these relationships, and it was a way to showcase Vietnam. And so when I was over there doing the press tour, and we had a screening with like the U.S. ambassador and a like Vietnamese minister of culture, and had this huge premiere at the Hanoi Opera House, which is the last scene of the movie where they're meeting in front of, but we were inside of it, and they'd never let a foreign company use that before. And they're making all these speeches about like how much of an impact this movie is going to have on changing the perception of Vietnam in the global narrative in a way that nothing has ever done before. And like, it was crazy. Like,
wow.
And they're soft power, which is a term I hadn't really thought of before in terms of rom-com, but soft power is like cultural sort of influence and persuasion as opposed to economic power or military power. That's hard power. That's like, legislative power, but soft power can change the world. And like, they talk a lot about K-pop and the ways in which K-pop through like this pop music has suddenly, introduced Korean culture on a different level and had a huge impact on their economy. And so for Tourist Guide to Love, it got something like 53 million views. And it was #1 in the world on Netflix. And so the idea that like, and in the response that I've gotten from people who have said things like a lot of the Vietnamese community being like, I've never, like, they're so grateful, like, to see their culture represented on screen in a beautiful, joyful way. They're like, I've never seen Vietnamese people or Vietnamese culture, because it's always Vietnamese people are, because it's war movies, it's always they're like victims or villains or prostitutes or refugees, to just see like Vietnamese culture just presented in a normalized way and in an appreciative, beautiful, celebratory way meant so much to people. And they're like, I'm going back to Vietnam now for the first time, or my mom hasn't been back in 30 years and now she wants to go back to Vietnam. And so like that, and hearing from people that like the actual numbers of like tourism like have gone up, like that's hard power actually. So the soft power turns into hard power because it brought millions of dollars into the Vietnamese economy through that movie, through someone watching like a rom-com. And so they're coming in the door, it's like the sneak attack. Like you can use rom-coms because like I know that at the end of the night, like I don't want to watch I don't want to watch something dark and heavy when I put my kid to bed at 9. Like I just want, but like, so maybe I'll watch a movie that's set in a place and it is a rom-com, but it's making me laugh and it's bringing me joy, but it's showing me a different world that I had never experienced. And then suddenly that's opening up my mind to that, whether it's a queer romance, whether it's a set in a different ethnic community, whether it is set in another country. Like you can, the power of romantic comedies is like the whole catching more flies with honey thing. Like you can bring people who would never want to like learn about some of these topics or like learn about Vietnam or anything like that. You end up like just subtly changing people's perceptions because they wanted to watch a rom-com. And so that's why for me, I think it's just such a power, like it's taken a while, but just sort of like step into the power of like what it means to be a rom-com writer and not to feel like, oh, I write rom-com.
Right.
Or like, oh, I love rom-com. Like society and the patriarchy just basically teach us that we're not supposed to feel proud of that fact and that it's somehow lesser than. But I love that you guys are doing that and celebrating them and talking about why rom-coms are important and why they are just awesome.
Yeah. And the Wanderlust rom-com, Isabel and I have talked about a lot, like how important that subgenre is. Like that's one of my favorites, absolute favorites, just seeing culture shocks and, new countries. And it's just such an escapist subgenre that I just love. And that's so beautiful that people have gone to Vietnam because of your movie and things like that. Like
someone actually created a Tourist Guide to Love tour. So like they will take you to like the places where we filmed apparently, like and to all the you start in Saigon and they like you go to the hotel, you go to the rooftop deck, and then they take you up through the place where the the beach where we filmed. Like they apparently take you all the way through. I was like, I should go to that. I was like, I should get a cut.
It's so true. Like right. Like I'd never really seen modern footage of the countryside. Like it was, it was kind of my first exposure in modern media to Vietnam, and it was really cool to see and so beautiful.
They did a wonderful job, the director and the cinematographer, in terms of capturing the beauty of it and just really, and I mean everyone on the film, I think it turned out really well. I had a really great experience. Rachel is amazing. She was a producer on it and is like an actual producer, not just like, all the actresses that say they're producers and it's just like she's like nitty gritty, all the details. And all the producers that worked on it, and Netflix was great. They were so supportive. They sent me on this, like, we did this whole press tour in Vietnam. Like, writers normally don't get any attention or love, basically. Like, the writers of movies, it's like, oh no, like, who wrote this? I don't know. Like, you're like barely there. They don't really want you around. But then they, because I was Vietnamese and because it was a personal story and they were sort of trying to get into the Vietnam market, like, we did this whole week-long press tour over there, and I had like my own glam squad. I had like
so cool.
my own driver. I was like, they put me up in like fancy hotels. I was like, oh my god, like, they ruined me though, because they unlocked my inner fancy person, and I didn't realize I was a fancy person. And now that I realize that I'm actually a fancy person, but I can't actually afford to be a fancy person, I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I gonna? Like, I'm actually business class, man. Business class to Asia is heaven. Like, you could just put me on the plane and just fly me around the world in business class, and I would be happy, like, for days and days. Like, it's incredible. But now when I have to go back to like economy, I'm like, I want to. But
that must have been so fun, flying business class, like, to go on your like press tour for your movie. Like, that's a movie in itself.
I know. I was like, who am I? Who am I really? Like, and that's the thing, is like, being a Hollywood screenwriter, people think it's really glamorous, and it's so not. Like, I'm sitting on the floor of my like 1-bedroom house that I share a room with my daughter, because this is like what we can afford in LA. Like, my writing room is normally like my laundry room. Like, that's like my office is like this closet like next to my laundry machine. It's not glamorous, but then every once in a while you get to do something fun and glamorous like that, and you're like, all right. Like, or you get to meet with someone famous, or you get to go to like a big party or like a movie premiere and feel fancy. So it is fun. That part is fun. But yeah, so it's just, but it's up and down. It's a super, like, people forget, yes, this is my dream job, but it's a job. It's still a job, and you have to think of it as a business. Like, for people who are trying, if anyone's listening and you're like, want to be a writer, you have to pay attention to the business aspect of it, not just the writing aspect. Who's buying, who's selling. You read the trades, pay attention to like what production companies are working on the types of things that you like, and what types of story trends are out there, or what is an underserved market. How can you bring your specific voice and your specific experience to what is a very formulaic genre? And so, like, the plots aren't going to really change too much, but like, I mean, like, the formula. But like, how can you take it and make it fresh? So something that hasn't been, something that's done before. It's like same way, like, you can have a Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookie, or you can have a Crumble chocolate chip cookie. There's many levels. You can add different ingredients. You can add Walmarts. Walmarts. You can add walnuts. You can add a Walmart to your chocolate chip cookie. Like, you can play with that recipe, and you can flavor it any way you want. But like, how are you gonna make it yours? And so that is something that I would give as advice for people who are looking to get into screenwriting, is like, and especially if you are a rom-com writer, to look at the rom-coms that you love and think like, how could I just twist this? Just not like, not completely, enough that, whether it's a different setting, whether it's my ethnic identity, whether it's my gender identity, my sexual identity, whether it's the career or the niche world that it's set in, like, can I set this in space? Can I set this on a boat? Can I set that, like, in what way can I take this storyline of, meet cute, fall in love, have challenges, hit rock bottom, fall in love again. That's basically sort of what's going on with the rom-com. How can you do that in a way that, because people want that familiarity, they want that comfort, but they also want fresh, new twists on that as well. So that's like sort of, and also my big thing with romantic comedies is that most of them are neither romantic nor funny. So it's like, that is the problem. Like, I will watch any bad romantic comedy. It's like eating a bag of Doritos, where I'm just like, I know it's bad, and it's gonna give me a stomach ache if I finish watching this. I'm gonna eat the whole thing. I'm gonna eat the whole thing and then have like orange fingers. I'm gonna feel kind of gross, but like, I'm gonna keep eating it, and I'm gonna keep watching this rom-com, because there are not enough on. I just feel like they don't make enough.
Great.
So, but like, focus on the romance. Like, I want a romantic comedy where I actually want these characters to get together. I want to feel like they should be together, and I want to believe that they would get together. And then I want it to be funny. They don't have to be like crazy funny, like hard edge comedy, but like, funny.
Yeah.
Like chuckle funny, like, oh, like smile funny, like, ooh, like just something uplifting, something that brings a little bit more joy and some levity into it without being like, I think sometimes people try so hard to be funny in romantic comedy sometimes that it takes away from the romance, so it's a balance. And always also just making sure that the characters, like for me, characters are really important. And I spend a lot of time working on the characters that I write. And so trying to make sure that they feel organic and that they feel true, And it's hard sometimes because it doesn't necessarily come across on screen sometimes. Because like when you write things, for people who don't know, when you write a movie and you hand it in, that's it. You're done. They're like, peace out. You may never hear from them again. You have no control, no power. They can rewrite you, which I've been rewritten. They can rewrite you without giving credit. So because you have to change like a huge amount of a script in order for it to change like who it was written by. They can just cut scenes. The director can rewrite scenes. The actor can improvise scenes. You have no say over the casting. You have no say over market. Like you have literally no say. They might, if you're lucky, if you have a good relationship, like ask you some questions, or you can like make some suggestions, like this is who I saw in this role, or here are some songs that I listened to while I was writing, or things like that. But like you literally have no control over it. So and also even before you sell your script, you have very little control. Like when you're pitching and you're working with the producer and you're coming up with the outline and the concept, they'll be like, oh, well, it needs to be more like this. And then you make the changes. You're making compromises often very early on in the process. So I never actually blame a writer for a bad movie. Like because everyone's always like, oh, that script is horrible, and I'm like, nope, that's not their fault. Not their fault. I know exactly why that script is horrible. It's because some studio or executive or producer or actor came in and was like, you need to change this. And they are just trying to get paid and get their movie produced and get the script written. And so you make the changes and you try to do them as best you can. And you try to like still, represent. And my motto is either give them what they want or make them want what you have to give. So you have to find that balance of still doing the best version of whatever it is that they're saying you have to do, but you don't have a lot of control over it. And that can start very early on in the process. So keep that in mind if you are a writer or a viewer, don't like, if you see a rom-com and it doesn't, and you're like, oh, ugh, and then you see the writer of it, like, don't necessarily be like, I'm not going to watch something they write ever again, because it might not be their fault. They might be
That's a great
the
reminder.
most brilliant
writer
ever,
I like that.
and their script got taken over and changed to a very different thing that you have no control over.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind.
I do have a question for you about like just sort of your because I'm also a biracial writer, and I think about this a lot when I'm writing stuff that is like specific to my ethnicity as an Indian woman. And so I'm kind of curious, like when you were writing this script, were you writing about all of the like were the ceremonies? I mean, even I loved about the movie was like learning the different cultural parts of it, right? Like the food, the different ceremonies, and like I love to see that kind of stuff. And I always wonder, did you write that into it, or did that get added later, or like?
I wrote specific, like a lot of it I wrote into it, like the traditions built around Tet, which is the Lunar New Year, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
I put a lot of that into the script, but then it was also added to we had a lot of, because like, I'm Vietnamese American. I don't, there's a lot that I don't know about Vietnamese culture. I am not an expert. I don't speak Vietnamese. So like we had a lot of consultants on it, and we had some Vietnamese, like we had the Vietnamese producers, the people in Vietnam that were like sort of like the actual sort of facilitating producers of the, not just like the creative producers, but they would be like, oh no, we need to do this, or just making sure that details were right, and set designers and things like that, making sure that the details were there. So it was a combination of me sort of putting my experience and my knowledge of what the experience would have been like and then multiple other people who had a better idea of like the intricacies of it, to make sure that we got as many details as we could have gotten right. And there were a lot of Vietnamese people working on this project, sort of behind the scenes. And so I would say, like, yeah, like put it in, and you put in what you know, or if you don't know, like you can Google it, add it in, and then you just make sure you just check with other people. You just sort of like check in on like, okay, is that, but everyone has a different experience. It depends on the story that you're writing, and if you're, because so if, for example, like one of my Christmas movies, Sugar and Spice Holiday for Lifetime, was the first Asian-centered Christmas cable movie ever, and it's literally just straight up formulaic, like architect goes back to her small hometown and reconnects with their junior high school crush and enters a gingerbread baking competition. Like it's literally, but she's Chinese American and her whole family is Chinese, so they're like eating, and her mother is a Chinese immigrant, or her parents are Chinese immigrants. So it's like some people speak with accents, some people don't. They eat with chopsticks. They're making jokes about stinky tofu. There's a family altar in the background, but it's not like about being Asian at all, but she is Asian. And so there's a little bit, there's a couple microaggressions in there, but like that I sort of call out, like, I didn't know you celebrated Christmas. Like, why wouldn't I? But it's still literally like straight up. And that was one of the things I wanted it to do, was to normalize the Asian experience, where it's just like, yes, Asian people also celebrate Christmas, and we have Christmas trees, and yes, we might eat with chopsticks, maybe we don't. Like it just, that idea of like trying to present as many different perspectives on an experience. And the more we do that, then it becomes more normalized, and then it becomes more representative. And it doesn't always, because not every minute of your life is lived inside of your racial identity. There's so many other parts of who we are that inform our experience in this world. So to say that like every story I have to write has to be about being Asian is like so limiting, because white people don't have to do that. And so you can make your character a specific race and living within a specific identity without making the entire story built around that, because they're going to want to force that on you sometimes. You're like, so we have to set that, like we have to like add more Asianness into and it's like, do we? Does it have to? Like, if this was a white character, would we have to be like talking about all of their heritages and their cultural traditions? But at the same time, you're like, ooh, this is my one chance to represent this, and I want to represent, so I want to get this in, and I want to like teach this lesson. So again, it's all about balance. And you're biracial, you should know this, right? This is what we do. I was just speaking on a panel about intersectionality, and I was like, my whole life is an intersection. Like, as a biracial person, I basically live in an intersection. Like, and my whole life I've just had to learn how to go back and forth between different worlds and different identities, because you're always either too much of one thing or not enough of the other. And I think that has actually served me as a storyteller, because I can see the perspectives of multiple people. I've had to slide into different worlds and play different roles my entire life. And so as a writer, that has given me a way to sort of look at things, I think, with a more open, creative mind. So I would say lean into that for you.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder for me, because I feel like I've sort of had a little bit of the opposite experience like lately, where I'm getting told like, oh, there aren't people to play these roles. Like, they're like, who's gonna, like, what Indian actress is like a lead in a rom-com? And I'm like, well, Dev Patel just said he wants to lead a rom-com, so I do think that there are
it's a real issue, and that is something that I have dealt with like throughout my career, and castability, and thankfully it is changing. There are, and especially, for me, for the Asian community, like after Crazy Rich Asians, it's totally changed the marketplace in terms of the desire to tell Asian stories. And so there are now so many more actors, and at different levels, like for like the Indian actors specifically, like there's so many more, like not just coming out of India, but like Indian American actors as well. Never Have I Ever has opened up a different, like the success of that has been great. And then it just sort of keeps stacking and stacking and stacking. And hopefully it will just like there will be so many, instead of there just being the one, we only have this one, like we've got Priyanka Chopra, like if you can't get her, then we're not gonna make it, if you get Mindy Kaling, then like, oh, I guess you're done. Like, so ideally, and that's the whole hope, that like people are, lifting up that community so that it creates more jobs. And that's why I do keep writing certain things to try to create more jobs so that more actors get cast. And then those actors can then get cast in a bigger role, and it all sort of feeds into each other. And specifically, like if we're talking about things being made, I do want to mention the fact that apparently, supposedly the rom-com is back. Have you heard this? Have you seen all because of one movie, because of Anyone But You? Now suddenly everyone's like, and it's back. And I'm like, okay, it's one movie. But if they want to believe that, if they want to believe that the rom-com is back and people are willing to finance feature rom-coms, I am all for this trend. I am so excited. I have actually still haven't seen it, but I'm like, thank you, Glenn Powell, thank you, Sydney Sweeney, like thank you for making this movie. Thank you for all the TikTokers out there who apparently turned it into a sensation, because it did not open very big. It was not expected to be a big movie. It did not open big, and then suddenly it is. And so that's the thing, is that like they don't know what they're doing. Like they don't, like the other side, like the buyers, they think they know what they're doing, and they're trying. They are trying. They want to make, most of them want to make good movies and money at the same time, just like us. But you don't know, and so you have to, and that's why I tell you, like, pay attention to the market. Like, oh, anyway, now people are looking for rom-coms. Now is a good time to be a rom-com writer, supposedly. I'm hoping. There's going to be lots more theatrical rom-coms coming out, big screen, and that is actually a good thing, because back in the day, that was how actresses became powerful. If you look at like Reese Witherspoon, Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock, you start off, now you have to be in like a Marvel movie. Like now for a young actress to become a powerful, bankable force in Hollywood, they do action movies, they do like Marvel movies, Hunger Games, Jennifer Lawrence, things like that. But back in the day, it was rom-coms. Meg Ryan, Sandra Bullock, Julia Roberts, they were getting these huge paydays. Their movies were making a ton of money, and then they could go do then they could go get their Oscar. Then they could do their indie movie. Then they could sort of do their dramas but rom-coms were what made actresses a powerful force in Hollywood, financially and just, creatively. And so if the rom-com could come back, that would be incredible, because then that would also give agency to a generation of actresses that could use the rom-com as a way to, exert more control over their career and the industry, and then also just like have more good rom-coms.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
I feel like I would go to the movies like every day if there was just like a new rom-com to see every single day.
I would go every week. I would go all the time.
They're so much better on the big screen. Everything's better on the big screen. I mean, I do enjoy the whole, like, I'm in my pajamas, I'm just gonna like be on the couch and watch what's on. But I mean, if you look,
that's when I'm rewatching it.
Yeah, but like the rankings on Netflix, every time there's a rom-com, it's always in the top 10. Every time there's a new one, there's like, it's always like a bigger, like a newer, like slightly bigger one. And it's like, why don't they have one every week? Like there should be a new rom-com being released every week, because every week it's they're always in the top 10. And then then you have to wait like a month.
If I was like the CEO of Netflix, that would be what I would do. It'd be like, okay, we need a monthly rom-com release or like a weekly rom-com release, and then everyone would subscribe to Netflix because they'd be like, ooh, I can't wait to see the new rom-com of the week.
I mean, I wish there was actually
free
like
advice.
A streamer that actually just like was only rom-coms.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Hallmark is that to an extent. Like Hallmark kind of is that, but like I want not just Hallmark rom-coms. I wish there was like someone who would just license all of the rom-coms that are already there, and so I could just go to that instead of having to like scroll through everything to try to like find which good rom-coms are out. Or do you guys?
That's true.
Do you guys like have something where because like I have like 8 different streamers now.
Yeah.
And I have to, I'm like, oh, but I haven't checked Peacock in a while. Does Peacock have one? And then like having to go through, I wonder if there is like a database of like all the rom-coms on all of the streamers.
Yeah.
Like they have there's like family film ones that I look up, and I'll be like, okay, I need a movie for my kid. And there's some websites where they're like, these are all the family films like on all of these different platforms. Like I wish there was a rom-com.
That'd be really great.
Here for you guys.
We can put it on our website.
Maybe that's what we'll grow our podcast into.
Yeah, grow the podcast.
Like a
like
new
into the rom-com database.
There's like an app where it's like, want rom-com, but like this type of, like travel, like travel rom-com, like, and you type that in and it gives you a list of like all like a little app algorithm that can like
and like where you can watch it.
Like, the type of rom-com that you want to watch, and it'll sort of, or if you're like, maybe I want a romantic drama,
Yeah.
Maybe I want a slightly more drama or something, or maybe I want like an R-rated one, or maybe I want, like Hallmark style one, or I want a Christmas one, or I want like, and you can just like type that in and it'll tell you where to go. Somebody do that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great idea.
Definitely. We don't really have a name for these questions, just rapid fire questions. We want to think of like a rom-com trope kind of, I don't know, a better name. But okay, the first question is just, what is your favorite rom-com and why?
Oh dear. I'm like, I should have thought about this beforehand. I'm like, it just depends on what mood I am in. Let me just go into my, I'm like, oh, now like my brain is shutting down. Favorite, I'm like, who are my favorites? Maybe like my old school one would be, I think my favorite rom-com actress of all time is Sandra Bullock. So I'm gonna go through my Sandra Bullock movies in my head and say, for a second there was While You're Sleeping, but then I love Ryan Reynolds, so maybe The Proposal. I don't know. That's the only one. That's
her and Ryan Reynolds are so good in The Proposal.
Yeah, I just love.
So good.
I love Sandra Bullock is like my all-time key like favorite rom-com heroine of all time. So I'm gonna say that. Oh, actually, also and Crazy Rich Asians. That's my other favorite rom-com. Okay.
What is your favorite rom-com trope to write?
Let me see. I mean, I love a good falling in love montage. Like a montage of them like going on all these fun days. I'm like, where can I throw them?
Dates,
like that fun day of like montage of them falling in love is something that I love writing that.
Favorite rom-com outfit? So any kind of iconic outfit.
Ooh. I mean, I like, because I don't think of them in terms of outfits so much. So the only one that I'm like really remembering is just Julia Roberts' hooker costume. Like, I'm like, what? I'm like, is that actually?
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe not that. Maybe the red dress. Okay, so now that I'm going to, because I'm like, okay, what clothes, what actually outfits are popping in my head from rom-coms, and so Pretty Woman stands out to me, and so, but the red dress, I love her in that red dress.
That's a good one. I do always love that scene when she's like shopping in her like hooker outfit and the people are like judging her, and then she comes back in with her like fancy outfit on.
So good.
Love that. Love her. I mean, she was like, I remember watching that. Like Julia Roberts was just like a supernova. Like the charisma coming off of her in that role. In that, I mean, that movie is problematic for a lot of reasons these times.
Yeah.
But the chemistry between her and Richard Gere, and just like her shine, like her glow and her character, and the way that she really sort of elevated that storyline is like the magic of casting and what an actor can bring to a script.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you kind of just answered this, but what's or I guess unless this isn't your favorite, but what is your favorite rom-com line or like a moment in a rom-com?
Oh, favorite rom-com line? I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of what movies I quote all the time, but mostly I quote The Princess Bride a lot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a rom-com, right?
That is kind of a rom-com.
So, but the lines that I quote out of that are like you killed my father, like the romantic part.
Classic.
As you wish, I guess, is the romantic, the romantic line that is quoted from there.
Have you seen any rom-coms lately that you'd recommend that we should check out besides your films, of course?
Yes, and now I'm trying to remember what they were. Let me see, what was out on Netflix recently, or what have I watched recently? I loved. I mean, no, this is a little bit old, but I mean the Sandra Bullock one, like I said, the Lost City is so good. That one with Channing Tatum, amazing. They have great chemistry. I did really like Upgrade on Netflix recently. Like of the most recent ones that I've watched, Upgrade with, I think it's
on Amazon.
Or is it on Amazon? Or maybe it was on Amazon. Okay,
Upgraded.
Yeah, where she like
I saw that
accidentally gets upgraded to like first class and then meets a guy and then she pretends. Like, I thought that was really well done. I really like Marissa Tomei is incredible in it. I love Set It Up.
Which one?
love Set It Up.
Oh,
Set
yes,
It
yes.
Up.
That's a
I
really
love
good
that.
one. High quality.
Loved that one. That was so good. Glenn Powell, like, he's, I think, going to be like the next Matthew McConaughey in terms of the guy that does rom-coms, does action, does, drama, comedy, all of those things. And I love Lucy Liu. I've worked with her, and she's incredible. And I really want to write like a full rom-com where she gets to be like the love interest, because she's like amazing and incredible. Looking at other ones, yes, Idea of You is coming out. No Hard Feelings.
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
not exactly a rom-com. It's more of like a hard comedy. Because it's not like based on her finding a love exactly, but
that guy
in that
was
genre.
was in your movie.
Yeah,
right?
the same guy.
Yeah. And, well, he plays Alex in my movie, so I'm like, oh yeah, boy, like I'm gonna like, he's doing so great. He just got cast in a movie that they're making about Saturday Night Live back in like the 70s, and he's so talented and he's so sweet, and I love him. And when I saw this, I was so excited. I feel like he should be the next Michael Cera, like he like that sort of like
totally
that type of character. I think he holds that balance so well. But I love that movie. Is hysterical.
That was one of my favorite little moments in your movie, by the way, just to shout this out for people. When he has that moment with the girl, when he's like, doing all his like stuff, and then he points out that like he's doing it for like his grandpa and like the people watching.
Yeah,
I was like, that's a really
sweet.
fun way to like look at that, like it helped. I had a little moment where I was like, oh, sometimes you never know like why people are recording, and like like I had my grandma in her nursing home, and I used to like mail her, like I would print photos and mail them to her because she had no other way to like be able to see them. But it's like, sometimes we don't think about like who is receiving what people are, doing their lives.
That's actually the scene. The scene where they're on the beach talking, where the two teenagers are on the beach talking. That's actually the scene that I'm in the background of.
Like, so I didn't see you.
We were on set that day. So if you're watching the beach scene and they're talking, and you look it's literally like 1 second. Yeah. In the bottom right corner is me and my daughter.
Just like a little cameo in the background.
That's our little cameo. And my daughter, when we had the premiere and it was on the big screen watching, she goes, "We're famous." Like, not quite. And I was like, you literally have to like pause. Like pause the screen in order to see us. But yeah, that's what I'm like, that's my favorite scene in the whole movie, just because I'm in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
But yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, he's great. So those are some movies that I've liked in the past year.
Awesome. Well, I guess let's just wrap up with the last question on this of like, what are you working on now? What's on the horizon for you? And where can people follow your career or learn more about you online?
You can follow me on Instagram at Eirene Tran Donohue. And I'm working on another Christmas movie for Lifetime that will hopefully air this fall. And then I have a couple other Christmas movies out, like a sort of teen Christmas movie that we're trying to sell. And then I have a couple of TV shows that we are taking out as well. One's about 4 half Vietnamese sisters living in New York, based on me and my sisters. And currently I have a outline for a rom-com that I'm gonna write now, because I'm like, ooh, now there's a market for it. So a couple of that's the thing. Yay. I have like a million pitches, a million ideas. I'm working with Hallmark, hopefully waiting to hear back on a script that whether or not they're gonna make it, selling another pitch, hopefully to Hallmark, working with them, developing with different producers. I'm trying to set movies in Vietnam so I can go back there. I want to set a movie in Ireland because of my heritage, but I've never been to Ireland. I want to set basically I'm just trying to set movies in places that I can travel to. And
same.
I'm trying to jump on this rom-com, uplift. So hopefully in the next couple of years, I mean, you can always check me out. Lifetime Christmas, usually there's one of mine coming out at Christmas, so it sort of depends on what they're making that year, but that's sort of like the more reliable place to find me. And then but if you follow me on Instagram, then you'll hear. I've started a side thing where I write songs. And so I'm trying to make that just a fun thing. It's like I like writing song lyrics, and I wasn't a singer. And so then I took voice lessons, and then I decided to release a single on Spotify. And so I did. I hired someone to produce it. And so hopefully I'll be writing and releasing some more songs, but it's on Spotify under Eirene, and it's called The River Flows Anyway. And it's sort of like a folk indie pop song.
So cool.
And so, yes, that's the other thing that I do with my creative urges. I just say, like, anything you want to do, just do it. Go for it. Try it out. You never know. You get there, you'll figure it out. Be slightly delusional. You have to believe that you're going to be the one that makes it through, because everyone's going to tell you that it is super hard and it's never going to happen, and they're not lying. But, just stick with it, go for it, and who cares what they think. and laugh and spread joy and love through the world. And then you can check out my song if you want.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Yes, we'll put everything in the show notes. And we should wrap this up. Thank you so much for chatting with us. And
so much. This is so great. Thanks for doing the good work of spreading the word about rom-coms. And
it's one of our life missions. So
rom-coms forever.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
This has been an episode of When Isabel Met Aviva. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to stay up to date with our episodes, please subscribe. Bonus points if you leave us a positive review. You can follow us on Instagram at When Isabel Met Aviva and on Twitter at Isabel Met Aviva. We're both on Instagram, and Aviva is on Twitter/X if you want to follow her there. Your handles are just your name, right?
Yeah. Everything will be in the show notes.
Everything will be in the show notes. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or need advice on your screenwriting career, or if you just want to obsess over rom-coms with us. Sounds
great. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. And see you soon.